The apartment at the end of the hall. It's etched into my memory, that first night in my new apartment. Not the boxes piled high or the faint smell of paint, but the silence. The oppressive quiet of the corridor outside my door, broken only by the low hum of a distant street lamp filtering through the blinds. It pressed down, heavy and absolute, reminding me I was utterly alone on this ground floor unit. But beneath that silence, I felt it almost immediately, a sense of being watched. An unblinking, unseen presence lurking just beyond the threshold, maybe near the bedroom window. I couldn't shake the feeling I'd walked straight into a place where reality felt thin. I chose this apartment because it was cheap and close to my new job. The ad highlighted the convenience, ground floor, easy access to the shared courtyard and parking lot. Practical, I thought. It never occurred to me that a bedroom window facing a communal walkway might feel less like a convenience and more like an open stage. On the second day, standing at that window in the daylight, it looked ordinary. Shrubs, a concrete path, identical windows staring back from across the courtyard. Yet, even then, a knot tightened in my chest. I pictured someone standing just outside the glass, peering in. The first few weeks were uneventful, mostly. I established a routine: work, simple dinner, TV, sleep. The only real disruption was the echo of my own footsteps in the corridor. The hallway lights were always dim, sometimes flickering, and even though I knew I was the only tenant on this end of the building, the air felt thick, like someone else's presence clung to the peeling wallpaper. My heart always sped up when I turned the final corner to my door. Just loneliness, I told myself. Just an old, mostly vacant building. Then, about 2 weeks in, it happened. Lying in bed, a shape, black against the deeper black outside the window, snagged my attention. I hadn't heard anything, but I felt a shift in the night air. My breath hitched. Slowly, carefully, I rose and switched off my bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness so I could see out more clearly. A silhouette stood there. Lean, tall, impossibly still, seemingly pressed right against the glass. Cold sweat prickled my forehead. A trick of the shadows, my mind screamed. A branch? But there were no trees near that window, only the low shrubs and the path. My pulse hammered in my ears. Flick the light back on. Shout. Ignore it. I edged closer, trying to make out details. It was undeniably human-shaped. The longer I stared, the more distinct its outline became. Then, as if sensing my gaze, it jerked sharply away from the window and dissolved into the deeper darkness beyond the reach of the street lamp. Sleep was impossible. My thoughts spun, a late-night wanderer from another floor. Someone lost. Maybe someone homeless seeking shelter in the courtyard. Each rationalization offered fleeting comfort, but my dreams were plagued by tall shadows and figures lurking in doorways. The next morning, I forced myself to mention it to the building superintendent, hoping for reassurance. He listened, his expression turning stony. He explained, very matter-of-factly, that nobody else lived on my floor. That entire wing was empty. I haven't rented the other units out, not for years, he insisted. It's just you down there. The finality in his voice, devoid of any doubt, made my stomach churn. As I walked away, clutching my work bag, he added quietly, report anything suspicious, of course. But the look in his eyes, he didn't think I was imagining it. That night, I dragged a small chest of drawers in front of the bedroom window. It looked ridiculous, furniture barricading the glass, but it offered a sliver of peace. Still, every creak of the pipes, every sigh of wind outside, set my pulse racing. I kept seeing that silhouette. A few tense days passed. I started to breathe a little easier. Maybe it was just a random passerby, scared off. My routine settled back in. But the unease never fully left. Then came the footprints. In the thin layer of dust on the concrete path right outside my window, I started noticing single, isolated prints. Too large to be mine. They appeared as if someone had stood rooted to that spot for a long time, just staring. But there was no trail leading to or from the prints. They just appeared, then vanished beyond that small patch. Next were the sounds. A light tapping against the window glass in the dead of night. Tap, tap, tap. The first time, I nearly vaulted out of bed. A twig? Impossible. I froze, heart pounding, chest aching. The tapping stopped, replaced by that heavy, waiting silence. Then it resumed, lighter this time, like a single finger testing the surface. Terror seized me. Warmth drained from my face, my t-shirt clinging to my back with cold sweat. I didn't move, didn't look, praying that ignoring it would make it stop. Eventually, it did. In the morning, I examined the glass. It felt unnaturally cold, almost clammy. And there, at about eye level, was a single, smudged print. Larger than my hand, indistinct, like grease smeared on the pane. I tried scrubbing it off, but it resisted, faint traces remaining as if etched into the surface. I reported the tapping and the smudge. The superintendent looked alarmed but offered practical advice: better locks, maybe a security camera. He seemed reluctant to discuss it further, almost eager to end the conversation. I bought a small motion-activated camera and placed it on the windowsill, pointing out. Night after night, I reviewed the footage. Nothing but static darkness, blowing leaves, or the occasional stray cat darting past. Yet the feeling persisted. The footprints reappeared sporadically. The window sometimes felt cold. My heart hammered every time I checked the recordings, half expecting to finally see the silhouette inches from the lens. By the end of the first month, I questioned my sanity constantly. My reflection looked haggard. Dark circles bloomed under my eyes. Every night was a vigil, waiting for the tap, the creak, the shift in the shadows. The fear wasn't just outside anymore, it had burrowed inside me. One evening, the anxiety became unbearable. I moved the chest of drawers away from the window and sat in the dark, determined to watch, to see. Hours crawled by. My eyelids felt like lead. Then, a rustle, soft as breath, outside the glass. My heart leaped. An outline formed, pressing closer, agonizingly slow. It scraped faintly against the brick exterior, then halted, as if sensing me. We were both utterly still, me inside, it outside. A silent, terrifying standoff. Then, it began to edge away, slinking towards the corridor. Without thinking, adrenaline overriding everything, I bolted out my front door. My chest burned as I scanned the dim hallway. A fleeting shadow twisted around the corner, disappearing towards the door of the vacant apartment next to mine. Heart pounding, I approached that door. Hand trembling, I tried the knob. Locked. Solid. My breathing was ragged, metallic tasting. I pressed my ear against the cold wood. And I heard it, the faintest sound, like shifting fabric, from inside the locked, empty apartment. Dread washed over me, cold and absolute. I stumbled back, retreated to my own unit, and barricaded the door again, my mind reeling. The next day, I packed. Essentials only. Loading my car, I felt that crawling sensation on my spine, convinced something trailed just behind me. I could almost hear slow, deliberate footsteps echoing my own, but the corridor was always empty when I spun around. Turning the key in my front door lock for the last time felt final, terrifying. I practically ran the last few steps to my car, the air thick with unspoken threat. I sped out of the parking lot, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. But relief never came. My shoulders ached, my palms were slick. The drive felt endless, every dancing shadow beneath a street lamp making my heart flutter. Was that it in the side mirror? Just a trick of the light? Even now, hours later, safely away in a brightly lit motel room miles down the highway, my pulse hammers. The memory of those footprints, the tapping, the silhouette, and the impossible sound from behind that locked door, it's branded onto my thoughts. Did I leave it behind? Or did that presence, that silent watcher from the ground floor apartment, somehow slip out with me? Has it followed me here? The worst part isn't just the memory, it's the not knowing. Not knowing if I've truly escaped, or if I've simply opened the door for it to come closer, waiting to reveal itself again when I least expect it. And that lingering doubt is a horror all its own. The overnight shift at Blackwood Storage. You know that specific kind of quiet? The kind that hums deep in your ears when you're utterly alone in a vast, empty space. That's Blackwood Storage after midnight. Row upon row of identical metal doors, stretching down corridors lit by flickering, unreliable fluorescent lights. The air always smells faintly of dust, old cardboard, and something else, something vaguely metallic and cold. I took the night security gig here to make ends meet while studying. Seemed easy enough: patrol the hallways, check the locks, make sure the only things moving are the dust motes dancing in my flashlight beam. The first few weeks were just that, boring, quiet, punctuated only by the echo of my own boots on the concrete floor. Then, small things started happening. Things you'd brush off at first. I'd walk a corridor, check the units at the end, and on my way back, find a door I knew I'd just checked standing slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked, as if someone had peeked out after I passed. I started double-checking, even triple-checking the locks, telling myself I was just tired, letting my mind play tricks. Then came the sounds. Not the usual building groans or the distant hum of the ventilation. It started as a soft scraping, like something heavy being dragged across concrete, always seeming to come from just around the next corner. Whenever I hurried to investigate, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows, there was nothing. Just empty corridor, silent rows of doors. One night, patrolling the B-wing, I heard a distinct thump from inside one of the units. Unit beat 17. It wasn't just something falling, it sounded deliberate, forceful. My heart hammered against my ribs. Company policy strictly forbids opening tenant units, but my hand instinctively went to the cold metal latch. It was securely locked. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear anything else. Silence. Utter, complete silence, thicker than before. I backed away slowly, the hairs on my neck prickling. I started documenting these things in my logbook, feeling ridiculous but needing some record. 2:14 a.m., scraping sound heard near C-wing intersection. Investigated, nothing found. 3:08 a.m., loud thump from inside beat 17. Unit secure. My supervisor, a tired man named Dave who'd seen it all, just shrugged when I showed him the log. Old building, he grunted. Pipes, settling, rats maybe. Don't let it get to you. But the way he avoided my eyes felt off. The feeling of being watched intensified. It was a physical sensation, like cold fingers tracing my spine whenever I turned my back to walk down a long stretch. I started seeing flickers of movement in my peripheral vision, shadows detaching themselves from the deeper darkness between the rows, only to melt away when I snapped my head around. My pulse was perpetually elevated on shift, a low thrum of anxiety beneath the surface. The truly unsettling incident happened about 2 months in. I was in D-Wing, the deepest part of the facility, farthest from the small security office near the entrance. The lights back there flickered more erratically, sometimes plunging the corridor into near darkness for a few seconds before stuttering back on. During one of these blackouts, I heard it. Not scraping, not a thump, but breathing. It was slow, ragged, unnervingly close. Like someone was standing right beside me in the pitch black, inhaling and exhaling with a wet, gurgling quality. Panic seized me. Pure, ice-cold terror. I froze, flashlight clenched in my fist, afraid to move, afraid to even breathe myself. The darkness felt absolute, pressing in. The ragged breathing continued, seemingly inches away. I could almost feel the displaced air. When the lights flickered back on, sputtering weakly, I was alone. The corridor stretched out empty in both directions. But on the floor, right where I'd heard the breathing, was a small, dark, damp patch. It wasn't water. It glistened faintly under the weak light, and it evaporated completely within a minute, leaving no trace. I nearly ran back to the office. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my flashlight steady. I didn't log that incident. How could I? Heard breathing, saw weird wet spot. Dave would think I'd completely lost it. From that night on, I dreaded D-Wing. I'd take the quickest route through it, flashlight beam sweeping nervously, my ears straining against the hum of the lights for any hint of that ragged breath. Then came the box. I found it one morning at the end of my shift, placed squarely in the middle of the main corridor near the exit, a place I had patrolled less than an hour before. It wasn't there then, I was certain. It was a simple, medium-sized cardboard box, sealed shut with plain brown tape. No labels, no markings. It shouldn't have been there. No deliveries were scheduled, no tenants had been in overnight. It felt deliberate. Placed. Like a message. Or a trap. My first instinct was to report it, leave it for the day crew. But a morbid curiosity, fueled by weeks of mounting unease, took hold. My heart pounded as I cautiously approached it. Kneeling down, I ran my fingers over the tape. It felt cool, smooth. I hesitated. What could be inside? Old papers? Creepy dolls? Something worse? Just as I was about to try and peel back a corner of the tape, the main overhead lights in the entire facility flickered violently, then went out completely, plunging everything into emergency lighting, those dim, widely spaced red bulbs that barely cut through the gloom. Simultaneously, from down the long corridor behind me, echoing from the direction of D-Wing, came that awful, ragged breathing sound again, closer this time, and accompanied by a slow, shuffling footstep. Scuff, drag, breathe. Scuff, drag, breathe. Abandoning the box instantly, I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the exit, fumbling with the keys in the emergency lock, my breath catching in panicked sobs. The shuffling sound seemed to pace me, echoing louder in the sudden silence left by the dead main lights. I burst out into the gray light of dawn, gasping for air, the automatic door hissing shut behind me. I didn't look back. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove away, hands trembling on the wheel. I quit that job the same day. Dave didn't ask many questions, just processed the paperwork with that same tired resignation. I don't know what was in that box. I don't know who, or what, was shuffling down that corridor. I don't know if the damp patch or the breathing was real or just my frayed nerves finally snapping. But sometimes, late at night, when my apartment is completely silent, I hear it. A faint, rhythmic sound. Scuff, drag, breathe. It's probably just the old building settling. The pipes groaning. My imagination running wild. Probably. But I always check the locks. And I never, ever go anywhere near a storage facility after dark. Some doors are best left unopened. And some silences aren't empty at all. The cabin radio. The cabin was exactly what I needed, or so I thought. Tucked deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town, it promised absolute quiet, a place to finally unplug and finish my novel. The listing photos showed knotty pine walls, a stone fireplace, and windows looking out onto nothing but dense forest. Perfect isolation. The first few days were blissfully silent, broken only by birdsong and the rustle of wind through the pines. I settled into a rhythm, write all morning, hike in the afternoon, read by the fire in the evening. The only oddity was an old, heavy tabletop radio sitting on a dusty shelf in the living room. It was clearly ancient, with a cracked Bakelite casing and fabric over the speaker grill. It wasn't plugged in, and frankly, looked like it hadn't worked in decades. I didn't give it much thought. That changed on the third night. I was drifting off to sleep, the fire long dead, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the trees. Suddenly, a low crackle broke the silence. It was static, sharp and electric, coming from the living room. My heart gave a jolt. I sat up, straining my ears. The static continued, punctuated by faint pops and whistles. It sounded undeniably like it was coming from that old radio. Impossible, I thought. It's not even plugged in. Maybe interference from my phone. But my phone was off, charging by the bed. Hesitantly, I got up and crept into the living room. The radio sat inert on its shelf, bathed in moonlight. But the static sound was definitely emanating from it, a low, persistent hiss filling the small cabin. I reached out and touched the casing. It was cold. I checked again, no cord, no plug, no visible battery compartment. Yet, the static persisted. Feeling foolish but unnerved, I gently tapped the side of the radio. The static immediately cut out, plunging the cabin back into profound silence. I stood there for a long moment, my pulse thrumming in my ears, before retreating back to bed, telling myself it was some bizarre atmospheric quirk, a loose wire inside picking up stray signals. The next night, it happened again. Around 2 a.m., the static crackled to life. This time, though, it wasn't just noise. Beneath the hiss, I could faintly make out something else, fragments of what sounded like music. Distorted, old-fashioned music, like a waltz played on a warped record, fading in and out. Then, just as abruptly as it started, it stopped. Sleep didn't come easily after that. Every creak of the cabin walls, every distant snap of a twig outside, sounded amplified, suspicious. Over the next few days, the radio became more active, always late at night. Sometimes it was static, sometimes the phantom music. Once, I heard what sounded like a voice, low, indistinct, like someone mumbling just beyond the threshold of hearing. It never lasted long, always cutting out if I approached the radio or made a noise. I started feeling watched. When I sat writing by the window during the day, I'd get an intense prickling on the back of my neck, the feeling of eyes on me from the tree line. I'd look up, scan the dense woods, but see nothing but shadows and leaves. Footsteps sometimes sounded on the porch roof at night, too heavy for squirrels, too rhythmic for falling branches. I tried to rationalize. The isolation was getting to me. Stress. An overactive imagination fueled by the quiet and the weird radio. I even tried leaving the cabin during the day, driving into the nearest town for groceries, just to feel connected to the normal world. But the moment I returned and saw the cabin sitting silently amongst the trees, the unease flooded back. One rainy evening, I was trying to read by the weak light of a single lamp. The radio hadn't made a sound yet, but the air felt thick with anticipation. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window panes. Then, the radio crackled, louder this time, startling me so badly I dropped my book. It wasn't static or music. It was tapping. A clear, rhythmic tapping sound broadcast through the speaker. Tap tap tap, pause. Tap tap tap, pause. My blood ran cold. It sounded exactly like someone knocking. I froze, listening. The tapping continued, relentless, hypnotic. My gaze flicked towards the cabin's only door. Was someone outside? Was the radio picking that up? Slowly, heart pounding against my ribs, I forced myself to stand and approach the door. Peering through the small peephole, I saw nothing but rain-streaked darkness and the swaying silhouettes of trees. No one was there. Yet the radio continued. Tap tap tap. Driven by a surge of desperate frustration, I walked over to the radio. The tapping pattern didn't change as I approached. Trembling, I reached out and placed my hand flat on the speaker grill. The tapping stopped instantly. But through the faint vibration under my palm, I felt something else, a low, almost inaudible hum, like the thrumming of a deep, unseen machine. And the air around the radio felt colder, significantly colder than the rest of the room. I snatched my hand back as if burned. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat rigidly in a chair, watching the radio, waiting. It remained silent. The next morning, I decided I'd had enough. This wasn't relaxation, it was slow-burn psychological torture. I started packing, throwing clothes haphazardly into my bag, eager to just get out, drive away, and forget this place ever existed. As I zipped my suitcase shut, the radio crackled one last time. It wasn't static, music, or tapping. It was a single, drawn-out whisper, distorted but chillingly clear, that seemed to slither directly into my ear. It spoke my name. Jams. I grabbed my bag and fled. Didn't lock the door, didn't check anything, just scrambled into my car and peeled away down the muddy track, branches scraping against the windows. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror until I hit the paved highway miles later. I never went back. I called the rental agency from the road, made up an excuse about a family emergency, and forfeited the rest of my payment. I don't know what was going on in that cabin. Was it haunted? Was the radio some kind of conduit? Or did the isolation finally crack something in my own mind? Maybe it was just faulty electronics and an old house settling in the woods. That's the rational explanation. That's what I tell myself. But sometimes, when I'm alone late at night, if the TV or my computer speakers emit even the slightest crackle of static, I freeze. My heart pounds, the air feels cold, and for a terrifying instant, I hear it again, that low, distorted whisper, seeming to curl around my name from an impossible source. And I know, deep down, that I didn't just leave the cabin behind. A piece of its silence, and the strange signals hidden within it, came back with me. The 14th floor. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the only light piercing the gloom of my office came from my monitor. End of quarter reports. The fluorescent hum of the empty 14th floor was my usual late-night soundtrack. I work at the Riverside Corporate Center, a privilege that comes with the isolation of being the only one with keycard access after 7 p.m. The cleaning crew is gone by 6, security does rounds at 8. After that, it's just me. I prefer it, the silence helps me focus. That's when I heard it. A giggle. High-pitched and quick, like someone trying desperately to stifle it. It seemed to drift from the direction of the main conference room, maybe 20 feet away. My fingers froze mid-sentence. Another laugh, louder this time. Definitely female. Unfamiliar. My shoulders tensed. I pushed my chair back slowly, the wheels whispering on the carpet. The conference room door was closed, just as it had been all day. No meeting scheduled, blinds drawn tight. I hadn't been in there once. A soft thud came from behind the door, followed by what sounded unmistakably like whispering. My mouth went dry. I stood, legs shaky, grabbing my phone. No missed calls, no notifications. I compulsively checked the floor's access log on my computer, a habit since my promotion. No entries since Maria from the cleaning crew left at 5:58 p.m. Another thud, harder this time. Then scraping, like furniture being dragged across the carpet. Impossible. People were in that room. But I had the only keycard. I'd been sitting here, within sight of that door, for nearly 4 hours straight, buried in spreadsheets. Heart hammering, I walked towards the conference room. The motion-activated lights in the short hallway flickered on, harsh and sudden. More whispers leaked from under the door, too muffled to make out words. I pressed my ear against the cool metal. A woman's voice, sharp, unfamiliar, shrill. A man mumbled something, followed by another giggle. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. I knew it should be locked. I checked it myself every night after the cleaners left. The handle turned with a soft click. It wasn't locked. I snatched my hand back as if burned. The metal handle was ice cold, far colder than the aggressively air-conditioned office air could explain. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. Sweat beaded on my forehead. More movement inside. The scraping sound again, then a rhythmic tap-tap-tapping. My security training screamed, "Call building security. Let them handle this." My phone was still clutched in my hand, screen dark. I tried to unlock it, but my sweaty thumb kept slipping. The giggling stopped abruptly. Complete silence fell, broken only by my own ragged breathing. Then, knock knock knock. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks on the door, right in front of my face. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, my phone clattering to the floor. Knock knock knock. More insistent. The door handle began to turn. Slowly. Deliberately. I ran. There's no shame in admitting it. I sprinted back to my desk, grabbed my laptop bag, didn't even close the computer, and bolted for the emergency stairwell at the far end of the floor. Behind me, I heard the conference room door swing open, the thud of it hitting the interior wall echoing through the cavernous, empty office space. Don't look back. Every instinct screamed it. But I did. Just for a second, as I shoved the heavy stairwell door open. The conference room door was wide open. The lights inside were off, a block of absolute darkness. But I could make out shapes moving within. More than 2. More than should be possible in that space. They weren't distinct figures, more like smoke. But wrong. Flowing upwards, against gravity, spreading across the ceiling like spilled ink in water. I took the stairs 3 at a time, chest burning, stumbling twice but never slowing until I burst into the brightly lit lobby. The night guard, Dave, looked up from his crossword, startled. "Everything okay, Mr. Matthews?" I couldn't speak. Just pointed upwards, gasping. He called for backup. Within minutes, 3 guards were heading up to the 14th floor. I waited, gulping water from the cooler, trying to stop my hands from shaking. They found nothing. The conference room was empty, chairs perfectly arranged, whiteboard clean. No signs of entry, forced or otherwise. The security footage showed no one entering or leaving the floor after the cleaning crew. Dave suggested I was overworked, stressed, the building settling. I nodded, played along, said I was probably just jumpy. They gave me concerned looks as I left, but I didn't care. I knew what I heard. I knew what I saw. I called in sick the next day. Spent the morning researching the Riverside Corporate Center's history. Found nothing unusual. When I went back 2 days later, I requested a transfer to our downtown office. My boss was surprised, the 14th floor was prime real estate, a status symbol. I mumbled something about needing a change of scenery. He approved it, looking disappointed. I still had to wrap up projects, which meant going back. Only during daylight hours. Only when others were around. The conference room door stayed closed. Sometimes, walking past, I thought I heard a soft scratch, a whispered word. I never lingered. A month later, settling into my new downtown office, an email announced renovations on the 14th floor of Riverside. Gutting the entire floor. Including the conference room. The next day, my old boss called. His voice was tight, strange. "Did you hear what they found?" he asked. "When they started demo on the conference room?" I said no, keeping my voice steady. "Strangest thing," he said. "Behind the main wall, the one facing the hallway. They found an old door. Sealed up behind the drywall. Looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. But here's the weird part, it was locked. From the inside. And when they finally pried it open." He paused. "It didn't lead anywhere. Just opened onto the building's empty exterior shaft wall." I thanked him for letting me know and hung up before he could say more. Sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about that sealed door. About what might have been kept in, or kept out. I think about the laughter that sounded so human, until it didn't. About the shapes I saw moving against gravity. Last week, I ran into Dave, the night guard. He works at a different building now. He recognized me immediately. Still pulling those late nights, Mr. Matthews? I shook my head. He nodded slowly. Smart man. You know, we never told you what we really found that night. My chest tightened. The conference room was empty, yeah. But the table? The chairs around it? They were warm. Like people had just been sitting there. And the whiteboard. He rubbed his face, looking older. What was on the whiteboard? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. Fingerprints. Dozens of them, all over it. We dusted them, ran them. No matches. But. He swallowed hard. They weren't right. The patterns, the whorls, our tech said they didn't look human. Said he'd never seen anything like them. I walked away quickly. That night, I dreamed of the door handle turning, of shapes moving in darkness, of laughter that started human and became something else. I woke up drenched in sweat, the faint sound of scraping furniture echoing in my ears. Just my memory, I tell myself. They're tearing down Riverside Corporate Center now. Starting with the upper floors. I wonder what else they'll find behind the walls. But I won't be watching. Some doors are better left sealed. Some rooms are better left undisturbed. And some buildings, well, you're never really alone in places like that. I know that now. The last train home. The fluorescent lights of the subway platform hummed, casting a sickly yellow glow on the grimy tiles. It was 1:13 a.m. on a Thursday, and I was waiting for the last train home after a grueling late shift. Only 3 other souls shared the platform, each huddled in their own bubble of exhaustion, faces illuminated by phone screens. The air tasted stale, thick with the metallic tang of rails and something else, dampness, maybe. The distant rumble grew, echoing down the tunnel. Headlights pierced the darkness, and the train screeched to a halt, brakes groaning. The doors hissed open. I stepped into a carriage that was almost empty, choosing a seat near the middle. The doors slid shut with a pneumatic sigh, sealing me inside. As the train lurched forward, plunging back into the tunnel's darkness broken by flashes of emergency lights, I noticed him. He sat at the far end of the carriage, facing away from me. Perfectly still. He wore a dark, old-fashioned overcoat despite the mild autumn night, and a flat cap pulled low. Nothing overtly strange, perhaps, but his stillness was absolute. He didn't sway with the train's motion, didn't glance around, didn't fidget. He could have been carved from stone. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through social media to distract myself. The train rattled along, the rhythmic clack-clack of familiar lullaby. After a few minutes, I glanced up again. He seemed closer. I blinked, shaking my head. Just my tired eyes playing tricks. The distance was hard to judge in the long carriage. I focused back on my phone, but the unease lingered. The air in the carriage felt colder now, raising goosebumps on my arms. Tap. A single, soft tap, like a fingernail against glass. I looked up. The man hadn't moved. Maybe it was just the train settling. Tap. Tap. It came again, clearer this time. It seemed to be coming from the window next to the still figure. Odd. I tried to ignore it, turning up the volume on my earbuds, but the sound seemed to cut through the music. A slow, deliberate rhythm. Tap. 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 The train clattered through another station without stopping. This was the express run for the last train. The platform lights flashed past, momentarily illuminating the carriage. In that brief flash, I saw the man's head turn slightly, just enough that I could see the edge of his face in the reflection on the opposite window. His skin looked pale, almost gray. My heart started beating faster. I told myself it was ridiculous. Just a tired commuter, maybe asleep. Tap. 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 Louder now, more insistent. I forced myself to look directly at the window beside him. And my blood ran cold. On the outside of the window, condensation was forming in the shape of a handprint. A large, pale handprint. Pressed against the glass from the outside. As the train sped through the dark tunnel, I stared, frozen. How was that possible? We were underground, moving at speed. There was nothing out there but tunnel wall. The figure in the overcoat slowly, mechanically, turned his head fully towards me. His face was gaunt, his eyes shadowed pits that seemed to absorb the dim light. He wasn't looking at me, but through me. And he smiled, a thin, bloodless line stretching across his face. He didn't make the tapping sound. The tapping came from the window. From the handprint. Tap. 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 Frantic now, desperate. As if something outside was trying to get in. The train suddenly plunged into absolute darkness as we entered a longer, unlit section of the tunnel. My breath hitched. I couldn't see anything, surrounded only by the roar of the train and the frantic, echoing tap 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 right beside where the man had been sitting. When the lights flickered back on moments later as we approached my station, the man in the overcoat was gone. The seat where he'd sat was empty. The tapping had stopped. The train screeched into my station. The doors hissed open. I scrambled out, stumbling onto the platform, gasping for air. The train pulled away, leaving me alone in the echoing silence. I ran home, didn't stop until I'd triple-locked my apartment door. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, a waking nightmare. But as I lay in bed, sleep impossible, I heard it. Faintly, at first, then growing clearer. Coming from my bedroom window. Tap. 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 The reading chair. It arrived the Tuesday after I moved into the old rental house on Elm Street. Not something I ordered. It just appeared on the covered front porch sometime between me leaving for work and coming home. It was an armchair. Old, maybe vintage. Covered in a faded floral fabric, roses, I think, though the colors had bled into muted browns and greens over time. It had dark wooden legs, intricately carved, and plump cushions that looked surprisingly inviting despite the chair's obvious age. There was no note, no delivery slip. I checked with the neighbors, no one saw it delivered. I called the rental agent, they knew nothing about it. Assuming it was a mistake, maybe left for a previous tenant, I wrestled it inside, planning to call a donation center later. It was surprisingly heavy. I placed it in the corner of the living room, intending to ignore it. But my gaze kept drifting towards it. There was something comfortable, almost magnetic about its presence. That evening, after microwaving dinner, I found myself sinking into it with a book. It was perfect. The cushions enveloped me, the angle was just right for reading. The fabric, though faded, felt soft beneath my fingertips. I read for hours, longer than I had in months, completely absorbed, the house silent around me except for the turning of pages. The next day, I came home from work exhausted. The first thing I did was collapse into the chair. Again, that immediate sense of comfort, of rightness. I drifted off for what felt like minutes, but when I woke with a start, sunlight was streaming through the window. I'd slept the entire night in the chair, something I never do. I felt incredibly rested, better than I had in weeks. This became the routine. Work, home, chair. Reading, napping, just sitting. It felt like the chair understood fatigue, like it was designed specifically to soothe tired bones and minds. I stopped thinking about donating it. It belonged here now. It belonged to me. The first odd thing happened about a week later. I was reading, lost in a story, when I heard a sigh. Soft, gentle, like someone releasing a long-held breath. It seemed to come from right beside me, from within the chair itself. I froze, book lowered. Silence. Just the ticking clock on the mantelpiece. I shifted my weight. Nothing. Must have been the house settling, or the wind outside. I went back to my book, but the feeling of being completely alone had subtly shifted. A few nights later, I fell asleep in the chair again. I woke suddenly in the pre-dawn gloom, not sure why. Then I felt it. A faint pressure on my shoulder, like a hand resting there gently. It wasn't heavy, wasn't threatening, just present. My heart hammered. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. After a long moment, the pressure lifted. I sat bolt upright, wide awake, scanning the dark room. Nothing. I started noticing other small things. Sometimes, when I sat down, the cushion felt warm, as if someone had just gotten up. Occasionally, I'd find the book I'd left on the side table resting open on the chair's armrest, turned to a different page. Once, I came home to find a faint indentation in the seat cushion, slowly fading, as if someone small had been sitting there. I tried telling my friend Chloe about it over coffee. "So, this magic chair appeared, and now it sighs and pats you on the back," she teased, though her smile faltered slightly when she saw my face. "Maybe you're just tired, working too hard." Maybe she was right. It was an old house, old furniture. Creaks and drafts were normal. Warm spots could be residual heat. The book? Maybe I'd moved it myself and forgotten. But the feeling persisted. A sense of presence clinging to the chair. Not malicious, not scary, exactly. More like, watchful. Comforting, even, in a deeply unsettling way. One rainy Saturday, I decided to finally clean the chair properly. I took off the cushions to vacuum underneath. Tucked deep into the crevice between the seat back and the base, my fingers brushed against something small and hard. It was a locket. Silver, tarnished with age, shaped like a heart. It wasn't empty. Inside, nestled against faded velvet, were two tiny, sepia-toned photographs. One was of a woman with kind eyes and hair swept up in an old-fashioned style. The other was of a young child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with big, serious eyes. They looked alike. Mother and daughter, perhaps. Holding the locket sent a strange chill through me, different from the usual cold spots in the house. It felt like holding a captured memory. I put the cushions back, tucking the locket safely into my pocket, feeling like a grave robber. That night, sitting in the chair felt different. Heavier. The air around it seemed thick. I didn't read. I just sat, listening to the rain, the locket warm in my hand. Around midnight, I heard the sigh again, longer this time, profoundly sad. Then, a whisper, so faint I thought I'd imagined it, seemingly coming from the fabric near my ear. "Thank you." My skin prickled. I stood up abruptly, backing away from the chair. Its familiar shape looked alien in the dim light, the floral pattern seeming to writhe slightly in my peripheral vision. Suddenly, I didn't want it in my house anymore. The comfort it offered now felt like a trap. The next morning, I dragged the chair out to the curb. It felt even heavier than before, resisting me. I left it there, next to the trash cans, and didn't look back. I spent the day out, walking in the park, going to a museum, anything to avoid being home. When I returned that evening, the chair was gone. Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. Someone must have taken it. Good riddance. I slept in my own bed that night, the first time in weeks. It felt wrong, lumpy, unwelcoming. I tossed and turned, missing the chair's embrace despite myself. I woke feeling groggy, unrest. As I stumbled into the living room to make coffee, I stopped dead. The chair was back. Sitting in its usual corner, cushions perfectly plumped, floral patterns seeming almost vibrant in the morning light. There were no drag marks on the floor, no dirt tracked in from the curb. It was just, there. As if it had never left. And resting on the armrest, where my book usually sat, was the tarnished silver locket. Open. showing the pictures of the woman and child. I haven't touched the chair since. That was 3 days ago. It just sits there, in the corner. Waiting. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the sighing. Sometimes, I think I feel a gentle pressure on my shoulder when I walk past. I don't know who the woman and child in the locket are. I don't know how the chair came here, or how it came back. All I know is that it feels like a part of the house now. A part of me. It offers comfort, rest, a place to escape. But I can't shake the feeling that if I sit in it again, if I accept its embrace one more time, I might just sink into it completely. And just like the woman and child in the locket, I might never get back up. The chair is waiting. It's always waiting. And it feels so comfortable. The flickering street lamp outside my bedroom window always casts strange shadows, but tonight, something felt different. I was scrolling through my phone, the blue light harsh in the otherwise dark room, when a movement caught my eye. Across the street, in the window directly opposite mine, a silhouette stood. Probably just Mr. Henderson, my elderly neighbor, I thought, though he usually went to bed much earlier. I dismissed it, turning back to my phone. A few minutes passed. The unease prickled again. I glanced up. The silhouette was still there, perfectly motionless. It hadn't shifted, hadn't moved an inch. That was odd. People fidget, they adjust, they move. This figure was like a statue carved from shadow. I squinted, trying to make out details, but the distance and the dim lighting made it impossible. Was it even Mr. Henderson? The shape seemed wrong, somehow. Too still, maybe too tall. Just tired, I muttered, pulling my curtains almost completely closed, leaving just a tiny gap. Paranoia. That's all it was. Late nights did weird things to your perception. I tried to focus on my phone again, but my eyes kept darting towards the gap in the curtains. The silhouette hadn't moved. It felt like it was watching my sliver of exposed window, waiting. My heart started beating a little faster. This was stupid. It was just a neighbor. Then, it moved. Slowly, deliberately, an arm lifted. A hand, silhouetted against the faint light from within that room, pressed flat against the glass of the neighbor's window. Palm out. Facing me. A cold dread washed over me. It wasn't a wave, wasn't a friendly gesture. It felt like a claim, a statement. I see you. I yanked the curtains fully shut, my hands trembling. I checked the lock on my window, then double-checked the lock on my bedroom door, even though I lived alone. I turned off my phone, plunging the room into near-total darkness, hoping it would make me invisible. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. Every distant car sounded like it was slowing down outside. Was the figure still there, staring at my now-covered window? Was the hand still pressed against the glass? When dawn finally broke, casting weak gray light into my room, I felt exhausted but relieved. The night was over. Whatever weirdness had happened, sunlight would surely banish it. I hesitated for a long time before approaching the window. Taking a deep breath, I pulled back the curtains just enough to peek out. The window across the street was dark. The curtains were drawn. No silhouette, no hand. Just a normal, sleeping house. A wave of relief, so strong it made me dizzy, washed over me. I let out a shaky laugh. See? Just my overtired imagination playing tricks. Mr. Henderson was probably fast asleep, oblivious to the terror he'd inadvertently caused. Feeling foolish, I turned away from the window and headed towards the kitchen to make coffee. As I walked past the window again, something on the outside of my own glass caught the morning light. I stopped, frowning. Leaning closer, my breath hitched in my throat. There, perfectly clear on the dew-kissed surface of my windowpane, facing inward, was the faint, smudged outline of a handprint. My blood ran cold. It wasn't condensation. It wasn't dirt. It was the distinct, greasy outline of a hand pressed firmly against the outside of my bedroom window. My window, which was on the second floor. How? I wiped frantically at the inside of the glass, but the print remained stubbornly on the exterior. My mind raced. A ladder? A very tall person with unusually long arms? A prank? None of it felt right. The stillness of the figure last night, the deliberate placement of the hand, this wasn't random. My gaze snapped back across the street. Mr. Henderson's curtains were still drawn tight. No sign of movement. Was he even involved? Or was the silhouette something else entirely? The rest of the day was a blur of anxiety. Every reflection seemed to hold a lurking shape. Every quiet moment felt charged, as if I was being observed through the walls themselves. I jumped at every unexpected noise. I kept the curtains closed tight, even though the lack of daylight made my apartment feel like a tomb. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? Someone might have left a handprint on my second-floor window last night after watching me. They'd think I was delusional. Night fell again, heavier than before. I didn't turn on many lights, preferring the shadows, strangely feeling safer if I couldn't see out. But I couldn't stop thinking about the window. Was the figure back? Was it watching my darkened room right now? I decided I wouldn't look. I wouldn't give it the satisfaction. I wouldn't peek through the curtains. I'd just get ready for bed, pretend everything was normal. Lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling, my ears strained, listening for any sound from outside. The usual city noises seemed distant, muted. Then, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound. Like breathing. Very slow, very deep. And terrifyingly close. It seemed to be coming from right outside my window. I froze, every muscle tensed. It couldn't be. There was no ledge out there, nothing to stand on. The sound was too clear, too near. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house settling. It was the distinct, wet sound of respiration. Tears pricked my eyes. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle any noise. The breathing continued, steady, unhurried. It knew I was listening. It had to know. It felt like it was breathing for me, setting a slow, dreadful pace. How long I lay there, rigid with fear, I don't know. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, as suddenly as it started, the breathing stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was it gone? Had I imagined it after all? Tap. A single, soft tap against the windowpane. So quiet I almost missed it. Tap. Louder this time. Tap. 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 Something was outside my window, breathing, waiting, and now, it was asking to be let in. It started with a single, lost photograph found tucked inside a library book I'd borrowed. It was old, black and white, showing a smiling family standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. Nice, but unremarkable. I almost left it for the librarians, but something made me slip it into my bag instead. Maybe it was the slightly odd, fixed expression on the father's face. A week later, walking home from work, I found another photo lying face down on the pavement. Same era, same black and white style. This one showed the little girl from the first photo, sitting alone on a swing set, looking directly at the camera. Her smile was gone, replaced by a wide-eyed, almost fearful stare. Strange coincidence, I thought, tucking it away with the first one. Then it became less coincidental. Over the next few weeks, more photos appeared. One was taped subtly to the underside of a park bench, the boy from the family, peering around the corner of the unfamiliar house, half his face obscured by shadow. Another fell out of a magazine I bought, the mother, blurred as if turning away quickly, her hand raised slightly as if to block the camera. Always the same family. Always black and white. Always found in mundane, random places. I started looking for them. My daily routine became a scavenger hunt. I felt a bizarre connection to this anonymous family, a growing obsession tinged with unease. Who were they? Why were their photos scattered like this? And why did they all look increasingly unhappy? Disturbed? The photos started getting stranger. One showed the house again, but this time, all the windows were dark, like empty eyes, except for one small attic window where a pale shape seemed to be standing. Another showed the family gathered around a dinner table, but their faces were scratched out with rough, angry lines. The latest one, found this morning tucked under my car's windshield wiper, was the worst. It showed the inside of a room, dark and cluttered. In the center, facing away, stood a figure that looked like the father. But on the wall behind him, drawn crudely but unmistakably in what looked disturbingly like smeared dirt or dried mud, was a stick figure drawing. A drawing of my apartment building. With an arrow pointing specifically to my window. I haven't left my apartment all day. I threw the photo away, but the image is burned into my mind. All the other photos are spread out on my coffee table. I keep looking at them, searching for clues, for answers. Who is leaving these? How do they know where I live? A few minutes ago, I heard a faint noise outside my door. Like something thin sliding underneath it. My heart is pounding. I'm too afraid to look. I don't want to find another photograph. Especially if this time, it's a picture of me. I only know that it's out there, spreading quietly. A mental contagion passed through a glance, a photo, a description, a doodle. An impossible loop you can't unsee, waiting patiently in the forgotten corners and in the quiet spaces of the mind, replicating itself one glimpse at a time. And the most unsettling part is wondering how many people now carry it, completely unaware they are hosts to a silent, looping unease. The unsent letter. When my great-aunt Alara passed away, I inherited her small, cluttered cottage by the sea. Sorting through her belongings felt like excavating layers of a quiet, solitary life. In the back of a wardrobe, tucked beneath yellowed linens, I found an antique wooden writing box. It smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Inside, nestled amongst dried flowers and faded ribbons, was a single, sealed letter. The envelope was thick, creamy parchment, addressed in elegant, looping script to a Mr. Alastair Finch, but with no street address, city, or stamp. The wax seal on the back, bearing an indistinct floral crest, was unbroken. Curiosity warred with a sense of privacy. Who was Alastair? Why was the letter never sent? Holding it, I felt a strange weight, not just physical, but emotional, a profound, inexplicable wave of melancholy washed over me for a moment, as sudden and unexpected as a rogue wave hitting the shore outside. I dismissed it as grief for my aunt, the atmosphere of the old house, maybe even the scent of the dried lavender triggering a memory. Respecting the unbroken seal, I placed the letter back in the box and set it aside on the mantelpiece, intending to research Alastair Finch later. That night, sleep was difficult. Not because of noise, but because of an oppressive sadness that settled in my chest, a heavy, tearless ache I couldn't trace to any specific thought. It felt foreign, borrowed. I kept thinking of lonely shores and words left unsaid. Once, I woke abruptly, certain I'd heard the faint sound of someone weeping softly nearby, but the cottage was utterly silent save for the sighing wind. A few days later, my friend Maya came to help me sort through books. She admired the writing box. "This is beautiful," she said, picking it up carefully. "What's the letter?" "Unsent, apparently," I replied, explaining my find. "Addressed to some Alastair Finch. Feels strangely sad, doesn't it?" I gestured vaguely at the box. Maya held the sealed letter for a moment, turning it over in her hands, her brow furrowed slightly. "Yeah," she murmured. "It does have a sort of heavy feeling." She put it back carefully. "We worked for hours, packing books, sharing memories of my aunt. But I noticed Maya grew quieter as the afternoon wore on. By the time she left, she seemed subdued, her usual bright energy dimmed. I chalked it up to the slightly gloomy task of dealing with remnants of the past. The next day, Maya called. "Weird thing," she said, her voice sounding flat. "I've been feeling so incredibly down since yesterday. Like, really profoundly sad, and I have no idea why. Nothing happened. Did sorting through your aunt's things maybe just get to me more than I thought? A cold knot formed in my stomach. Down how? Just, heavy," she struggled to explain. "Like carrying a huge weight. I keep wanting to cry, but I can't. And I had the strangest dream last night. I was standing on a foggy beach, waiting for someone who never arrived. Waiting for someone who never arrived. Like an unsent letter." My gaze drifted to the writing box on the mantelpiece. The connection felt tenuous, illogical, but terrifyingly real. Had Maya caught the sadness just by holding the letter? My own melancholy hadn't lifted. If anything, it felt deeper, intertwined now with a growing unease. I started noticing fleeting things, a whiff of unfamiliar, old-fashioned perfume in empty rooms, the peripheral sense of a figure in outdated clothing standing just out of sight, the recurrence of that soft, spectral weeping when the house was quietest. It felt like Aunt Alara's quiet sadness, amplified by the unsent letter, was leaking into the present. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I dove into my aunt's diaries and old family albums. I found mentions of a young man named Alastair Finch, someone Alara had been deeply in love with decades ago, before he moved away abruptly, communication ceasing. There were pages filled with aching loneliness and unspoken words. The final entry about him simply read, "Wrote to Alastair today. Perhaps this time." The diary ended shortly after. She had likely written a letter, full of decades of pent-up emotion, but for some reason, fear, pride, hopelessness, she never sent it. She died with that intense, unresolved longing trapped within the sealed envelope. The horror was understanding that this potent emotion, this lifetime of regret and sorrow, had somehow imbued the physical object. It wasn't a traditional haunting by a spirit, but by the feeling itself. And it was contagious. Touching the letter, perhaps even being near the box with intent or sensitivity, allowed the profound sadness to latch onto a new host. Maya had held it. I had held it. I knew I couldn't leave it where someone else might find it, touch it, and become infected by this quiet, devastating sorrow. Destroying it felt wrong, disrespectful to my aunt's trapped emotions. Burning it might release the feeling in a more chaotic way. With trembling hands, I took the writing box, the unsent letter still sealed inside. I wrapped it carefully in layers of thick cloth, then placed it inside a sturdy metal tin. I drove miles away, deep into a part of the woods far from any path, and buried the tin beneath the roots of an old, gnarled oak tree. Back at the cottage, the oppressive weight began to lift almost immediately. The phantom weeping ceased. The air felt lighter, cleaner. When I spoke to Maya a few days later, she sounded more like herself, confused but relieved that the inexplicable sadness had faded to a dull echo. But the knowledge remains. I know what that letter contained, not in words, but in feeling. I know that emotions, especially powerful, unresolved ones, can linger, clinging to objects like a psychic residue. And I know how easily that residue spread. Now, I look at heirlooms differently. Old letters, dusty boxes, forgotten trinkets, I wonder what echoes they might carry. I find myself hesitant to touch things steeped in unknown history. Because while I contain that particular sorrow, how many other unsent letters, unspoken regrets, and unexpressed griefs are sitting quietly in attics and forgotten drawers, waiting for a hand to reach out and inadvertently catch their contagious ache. The thought sends a deeper chill down my spine than any ghost story ever could. The midnight line. The fluorescent lights of the 14th floor hummed a low, tired buzz, a sound I usually found comforting during late nights at the office. But not tonight. Tonight, close to midnight, the familiar hum felt like a warning. My desk lamp cast a lonely circle of light on my cluttered workspace, leaving the rest of the open-plan room steeped in shadows that felt deeper than usual. I leaned back, trying to stretch the stiffness from my shoulders. I'd stayed late countless times, wrestling spreadsheets and firing off last-minute emails. Standard stuff. Yet, this particular night felt heavy. Every creak of my chair, every distant rumble from the street below made me jump. I kept glancing towards the vast, dark windows overlooking the empty city, my reflection staring back like a nervous stranger. Around 11:30 p.m., needing a jolt, I made the long walk to the break room at the far end of the hall. The corridor lights flickered overhead, and my footsteps echoed louder than normal in the profound silence. The coffee tasted stale, bitter, but I drank it anyway, hoping it would keep the growing unease at bay. Back at my desk, I tried to focus. Spreadsheets blurred. My eyes kept darting to the clock on my monitor, 11:51 p.m. The air felt colder, the small space heater under my desk doing nothing. I rubbed my hands together, feeling a prickle of anxiety I couldn't shake. It felt like waiting for something. Then, it happened. Arring. The sound shattered the silence, harsh and metallic. It wasn't my computer, not my cell. It was the old desk phone sitting near the edge of my workspace, a relic from years ago, gathering dust. My heart leaped into my throat. That phone wasn't connected. We'd switched to VoIP and cell phones ages ago. Management had decommissioned those old lines. It rang again, insistent, echoing through the empty cubicles. My breath hitched. Part of me screamed to ignore it, to grab my bag and run. But another part, a cold, morbid curiosity, took hold. My feet moved before I consciously decided, carrying me slowly back to the desk. My hand trembled as I reached out and lifted the receiver. My reflection was there, dimly visible, but behind it, deeper within the blackness, something pale had shifted. Like a face turning away just as I looked. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Must be exhaustion, screen fatigue playing tricks. I shrugged it off, gathered my things, and left. The next night, it happened again. I powered down, and as the screen went dark, I watched it intently. For a split second, clear as day, I saw a face in the monitor's black depths. It wasn't mine. It was pale, featureless except for two dark smudges where eyes should be, and it was looking straight out. Then, it vanished, leaving only my own wide-eyed reflection staring back. My heart hammered. I flicked the monitor back on, the familiar desktop appeared. Off again, just blackness and my reflection. I checked the power cord, the connections. Everything was normal. I told myself it was a strange afterimage, a weird burnout on the screen phosphors. But it hadn't looked like a technical glitch. It had looked intentional. Over the next few nights, the phenomenon became more persistent. Every time I turned off the monitor, the pale face would appear for a second or two in the dark screen. Sometimes it was looking straight out. Sometimes it seemed turned slightly to the side. It never moved much, just lingered, observing, before fading. I started dreading the end of my workday. I'd leave the monitor on longer than necessary, staring at bright web pages, anything to avoid that moment of powering down. I tried cleaning the screen meticulously, thinking it was some bizarre smudge. No change. One night, driven by a mix of terror and morbid curiosity, I decided to test it. I turned off the monitor, waited for the face to appear in the blackness, then slowly raised my right hand. My dim reflection raised its hand too, of course. But the pale face behind it remained still for a beat, then, with a slight, almost imperceptible delay, a pale shape mimicking my hand drifted up beside it. A cold wave washed over me. It wasn't just an image. It was mimicking me, but out of sync, like a bad video feed from another dimension. I tried recording it with my phone. I pointed the camera at the monitor, turned the screen off, and watched the pale face appear. I waved my hand. The mimic hand lagged behind. But when I played the video back, my phone screen showed nothing but the blank, black monitor reflecting me and my phone. The pale face, the mimicry, it wasn't captured. Only I could see it. That realization was worse than seeing the face itself. Was I hallucinating? Was the stress finally getting to me? Yet, the experience felt utterly real, chillingly consistent. The mimicry became more pronounced. If I turned my head, the pale face would turn a fraction of a second later. If I leaned forward, its shape would loom closer in the dark glass after a sickening pause. It never matched my expression, it had no features, but the intention of mirroring me was undeniable, and terrifyingly flawed. It felt like something unintelligent, something other, was learning to copy, badly. I couldn't work like this. I started taking my laptop home, avoiding the office monitor altogether. But then, I began catching glimpses elsewhere. In the dark screen of my TV after turning it off. In the black, inactive screen of my phone when it lay on the table. That same pale, featureless face, sometimes accompanied by a laggy, ghostly mimicry of my own nearby movements. It wasn't tied to the office monitor. It was tied to dark screens. I live alone. The nights are long. I've started covering my TV, my laptop screen, even my phone screen when I'm not using them. I use thick cloths, anything opaque. It feels absurd, like a child hiding from monsters. But even with the screens covered, I know what's potentially behind the cloth. I can almost feel it, waiting in the glassy blackness. Sometimes, I catch myself staring at a covered screen, imagining the pale face appearing beneath the fabric, mimicking my stare with its featureless gaze, just a half second behind reality. How long before the delay disappears? How long before it learns to mimic perfectly? And what happens then? Last night, I uncovered my phone screen just to check the time. In the instant before the display lit up, I saw it. The pale face. And for the first time, it wasn't just mimicking. In the fraction of a second it was visible, I could have sworn, it smiled. Think about it. How many dark screens are looking at you right now? What do you see when you really look into the black? The floor plan shifts. I've lived in the Oakhaven apartments for 5 years. It's an old brick building, the kind with slightly uneven floors, radiators that hiss in the winter, and a faint smell of dust and decades passed in the hallways. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. Familiar. At least, it was familiar. It started subtly, about 2 months ago. I came home late from work, exhausted, fumbling for my keys at apartment 4B. As I unlocked the door, my hand brushed against the wall beside the frame, and I paused. There was a small, hairline crack in the plaster running vertically from the top of the doorframe. I frowned. I'd never noticed it before. Must have missed it, I thought, too tired to care much. A week later, the crack was gone. The plaster was smooth, seamless, as if it had never existed. I ran my fingers over the spot. No sign of patching, no difference in paint texture. That was odd. Maybe maintenance fixed it without leaving a note. Unlikely, they usually leave notices. I shrugged it off, deciding I must have imagined the crack in the first place. Then came the door. Down the hall from me, near the stairwell, there's always been a blank stretch of wall. One Tuesday morning, heading out, I saw a door there. A plain, cheap wooden door, flush with the wall, painted the same drab beige as the hallway. No number, no handle, just the door itself set into the wall where only plaster had been the night before. My steps faltered. I stopped and stared. It looked like it had always been there, slightly dusty, fitting perfectly. I pushed on it. It swung inward silently, revealing a shallow, narrow closet. Empty. Bare wood shelves, dusty floor. Nothing inside. I pulled it shut, the latch clicking softly. My heart was doing a weird fluttery thing. I knew that closet wasn't there yesterday. I walked that hall every single day. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was an access panel I'd never registered. But it looked like a standard door, and why would it suddenly appear? I asked my neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Gable, later that day. The little closet by the stairs? Oh yes, dear, that's always been there. Hardly ever used, I imagine. Her certainty just made me feel worse, planting a seed of doubt about my own memory. Things got quieter after that, for a bit. Or maybe I was just trying harder not to notice. But then the sound started. Faint scraping noises, like something dragging, coming from inside the walls at night. Not rats, I know what rats sound like. This was slower, heavier. And sometimes, a soft, whispery sound, like sand shifting behind the plaster, always seeming to come from walls that bordered empty air or the hallway. The layout began to feel inconsistent. One night, walking back from the laundry room in the basement, the hallway leading to my apartment seemed longer. The usual 10 paces felt like 15. The pattern on the worn carpet seemed to repeat more times than it should. My skin prickled. I hurried the last few steps, unlocked my door, and slammed it shut behind me, leaning against it, breathing hard. The next morning, the hallway felt perfectly normal again. Was I losing my mind? Stress. Lack of sleep. I needed proof. I dug out the old, faded copy of the building's floor plan I'd received when I first moved in. I smoothed it out on my kitchen table. There it was, apartment 4B, the hallway, the stairwell, and a solid, unbroken line representing the wall where the strange closet door now stood. No closet marked. No access panel. Just wall. Relief warred with terror. I wasn't crazy. The building was changing. But how? Why? The changes became more frequent, though still subtle. A window in the stairwell landing seemed slightly wider one day. The ceiling in the lobby felt lower the next. Each time, the change was small enough to make me doubt myself moments later. The scraping sounds behind the walls grew a little louder some nights. Last night was the worst. I woke up needing water around 3 a.m. I padded out of my bedroom, through my small living room towards the kitchen. I stopped dead in the doorway. The layout of my own apartment was wrong. The kitchen sink, which should have been directly across from the fridge, was now situated on the adjacent wall. The counter space was different, the cupboard subtly rearranged. It was still my kitchen, my things were there, but the structure had shifted overnight. His reflection stared back, perfectly still. But its expression, it wasn't his own tired, anxious look. It was an expression of mild annoyance, quickly smoothed away into neutrality as their eyes met. Liam felt his blood run cold. He hadn't imagined that. The reflection had reacted to the towel being removed before he himself had fully registered his own expression. He backed away slowly, never taking his eyes off the mirror until he was out of the bathroom, pulling the door shut with a soft click. He didn't sleep in his bedroom that night, opting for the lumpy couch, leaving the bathroom light on. The next day, he avoided the bathroom mirror altogether, using the small, cracked mirror in the hallway closet instead. But the feeling of being observed persisted, stronger now, a low hum of awareness throughout the apartment. He felt a growing pressure, a sense that the thing in the mirror was becoming impatient. Driven by a mixture of fear and a desperate need for proof, he decided on one last test that evening. He stood before the bathroom mirror, phone held discreetly at his side, recording video. He went through his nightly routine, washing his face, brushing his teeth, forcing himself to act normally, though his hands trembled. He moved deliberately, watching his reflection. It was flawless, mimicking every tiny motion. Then, he did something unplanned. Mid-brushstroke, he suddenly dropped the toothbrush into the sink with a clatter and spun away from the mirror, turning his back completely. He waited 3 seconds, heart hammering, then spun back around. His reflection was still facing the mirror, mirroring his shocked expression from before he turned away. It hadn't turned its back. For a terrifying instant, the image in the glass was him, frozen in surprise, while the real Liam stared at its unmoving back. Then, with a speed that was nauseatingly fluid, the reflection snapped around to face him again, its expression perfectly matching his current horror. But Liam had seen it. The incontrovertible proof. It wasn't just lagging, it was operating independently. He didn't scream. A cold, paralyzing dread locked his throat. He backed out of the bathroom, grabbed his keys and wallet, and fled the apartment, not bothering to lock the door. He spent the night at a cheap motel across town, leaving the bathroom light off and avoiding glancing at the mirror above the dresser. Sleep was impossible. The image of his reflection, facing the wrong way, was burned into his mind. What was it? What did it want? Why his mirror? He never went back to the apartment. He called the landlord, gave a vague excuse about a family emergency, and arranged for a friend to pack his essential belongings, instructing him explicitly not to touch or cover the bathroom mirror. He lost his deposit and most of his stuff, but he didn't care. Liam moved to a new apartment, one with no large, fixed mirrors. He bought small, freestanding ones he could turn to the wall or put away. For weeks, he avoided his own reflection as much as possible. The intense feeling of being watched faded, replaced by a constant, low-level anxiety. He thought, maybe, he was safe. Then one rainy afternoon, he was waiting for a bus, staring absently at his faint reflection in the dark glass of the bus shelter. The streetlights flickered on behind him. In the glass, his reflection turned its head to look at the lights fractionally before he did. A familiar cold dread washed over Liam. It wasn't the mirror. It was him. Or rather, it was the thing that mimicked him. And it had followed. He looked around wildly, but the street was just wet pavement and hurried pedestrians. He looked back at the glass. His reflection smiled, a wide, slow smile that didn't reach its eyes, holding nothing but cold, patient awareness. It knew he'd seen it. And the horror wasn't just that it mimicked him, it was the chilling implication that maybe, just maybe, it was getting better at it. The rule of 3 knocks. It started with a misplaced grocery list. Clara was sure she'd left it on the kitchen counter, but after searching everywhere, she found it tucked neatly inside her shoe by the front door. Strange, but she shrugged it off, blaming her own forgetfulness. A few days later, her favorite mug, the blue one she always used for morning tea, vanished from the drying rack. She spent 10 minutes hunting for it before finding it sitting perfectly centered on her closed laptop lid in the living room. Again, weird. Annoying, even. But explainable. Maybe she was more tired than she realized. The small, inexplicable relocations continued. Keys appearing on the bookshelf, a book from her nightstand found balanced on the bathroom faucet, her reading glasses perched atop a lampshade. It was never destructive, just odd. Precise, almost deliberate placements of everyday objects in places they absolutely shouldn't be. Clara started doubting herself, wondering if she was developing memory problems or even sleepwalking. She lived alone in a quiet apartment building, locks always secured. There was no sign of forced entry. She even set up her phone to record the living room one night, but the footage showed nothing but empty, silent hours. Then came the knocks. It was late, nearing midnight. Clara was drifting off to sleep when she heard it, 3 distinct, quiet knocks. Tap. 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 They weren't loud, not like someone urgently demanding entry. They sounded like they came from inside her apartment. Maybe the bedroom door. Heart pounding, she sat up, listening intently. Silence. Just the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Probably the pipes settling, she told herself, although it hadn't sounded metallic. It had sounded like knuckles on wood. She forced herself to lie back down, pulling the covers tighter. The next night, it happened again. Tap. 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 Same time, same quiet deliberation. This time, it sounded closer, perhaps from the closet door across the room. Goosebumps rose on her arms. She whispered, "Who's there?" Her voice trembled in the stillness. No response. Only the heavy silence pressing back. She didn't sleep well after that. The misplaced objects continued, becoming slightly more unsettling. A kitchen knife laid carefully on her pillow. She found it before getting into bed, thankfully, her toothbrush standing upright in the sugar bowl. The daytime oddities felt mischievous, but the nighttime knocks felt different. They felt like a prelude. On the third night of the knocks, Clara was ready. She sat awake in bed, a heavy flashlight clutched in her hand. Midnight arrived. Silence stretched. Then, tap. 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 This time, it was undeniably coming from her bedroom window, the one overlooking a quiet alley 3 floors down. Impossible. Her breath hitched. With trembling hands, she aimed the flashlight beam at the window. Nothing. Just the dark glass reflecting her own wide, terrified eyes. But as she held the beam steady, she heard it again, softer now, almost hesitant. Tap. Tap, followed by a faint, dry scrape against the glass. She scrambled out of bed, backing away towards the bedroom door, flashlight beam still fixed on the window. She fumbled for the light switch, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. The scraping stopped. The window was empty, untouched. No ledges outside, no fire escape nearby. Nothing could logically be at her third-floor window, knocking. The next day, Clara felt like she was living in a different reality. The air in her apartment felt thick, charged. She noticed a pattern she hadn't consciously registered before. The misplaced objects always seemed to be things she had recently touched or used. The grocery list, the mug, the keys, the knife, the toothbrush. That evening, desperate, she searched online forums for objects moving on their own, phantom knocking, anything. She found scattered accounts, urban legends, but nothing concrete. Then she stumbled upon an obscure forum thread discussing old folklore. It mentioned a superstition, the rule of 3 knocks. The post was fragmented, poorly written, but the gist was terrifying. It spoke of a presence, a collector of sorts, that signals its interest by subtly moving personal items. If the inhabitant ignores or rationalizes these signs, the presence escalates. It begins knocking, 3 knocks, each night, from a different location within the dwelling, drawing closer. The folklore warned, never acknowledge the 3rd knock on the 3rd night. Don't respond, don't investigate, don't even look towards the source. Acknowledging it, the thread claimed, confirmed an invitation. Clara's blood ran cold. Last night had been the 3rd night of knocks. And she had looked. She had shown the flashlight directly at the window. She spent the rest of the evening in a state of near panic. What had she invited? The misplaced objects seemed to stop. The apartment was eerily still. No keys on bookshelves, no mugs on laptops.